Hello again, this is the third in our series Thinking Christianly about the virus, and again some of what I say will be based on Walter Brueggemann's book The Virus as a Summons to Faith. What are the odds? Given the choice between 3 years of famine, 3 months of running away from your enemies, or 3 days of plague, which do you think you'd choose? Until the current pandemic, we might have judged the question simply on the basis of time. What's 3 days of plague compared to 3 years of famine, after all? Or even compared to 3 months of running away from enemies? But now, we know exactly how devastating 3 days of infected people wandering around freely can be. So what would you choose? It's exactly the choice laid before David by God's prophet Gad. He tells David to choose his punishment. Before we think about the punishment that God offers to David, perhaps we should think about what David did wrong. It develops some of what we were thinking about last time. David, the king, decides to carry out a census. The story is told in 2 places in the Old Testament. In 1 Chronicles 21, where it's Satan who prompts David to call the census, and in 2 Samuel, where it's God who prompts David to call the census. In Chronicles, Satan prompts David. Satan isn't a medieval figure with horns and a pitchfork seeking souls to cast into hell, but rather Satan is the counsel for the accused, if you like. Satan tests human beings to find out the stuff of which we're made. Just a trial, a test. God, on the other hand, in 2 Samuel, is the person who prompts David to call the census, but in doing so, God is using David as a means against the people. So what's wrong with the census? We have them every 10 years, is it? Well, censuses perform 2 functions, in this reading at least. They're the instrument of power. They're imposed either in order to raise taxes or in order to conscript soldiers. So censuses were about power. And David knows that this is a sin. So when God challenges David and says which punishment will he choose, David doesn't challenge the fact that he ought to be punished. He knows that he's done something wrong. But it seems, when we look at how David makes this difficult choice, as though he understands the famine and the foe differently from the way he understands the pestilence. The famine and the foe, it seems to David, are ways in which God works through human beings. The risk of choosing armed conflict is obvious. The risk of famine is likely economic injustice, a kind of early austerity, if you like. Choosing plague, in David's view, is to place himself and his people directly into the hands of God. And there he expects to find mercy. David accepts that he deserves punishment. He doesn't try to talk God out of it, but he chooses a punishment that places him in God's mercy. The term used for mercy here is interesting. It's the word rahem, R-H-M, and it's linked to the term for womb. So David is relying on God's parental love for him to alleviate the punishment, to find mercy. It's an idea that we find in other places in the Bible, for example in Isaiah, when Isaiah is talking about the love of God as well, Isaiah 49 verse 15. And the prophet says, "Can a woman forget her nursing child, or show no sign of compassion, Rehem, for the child of her womb, Rehem?" So David is placing himself into the hands of a God who he regards as his parent. Now, I do not for 1 second think that there is any direct comparison between this story and the corona pandemic. I do, however, believe, as David did, that the mercy of God underlies all God's actions, all our experiences, and all natural phenomena. So as desperate as the current crisis seems, in some places we are discerning the mercy of God. We're hearing birds sing more loudly. We're seeing skies more clearly and in places where people have not seen the sky for years. And we are being community more committedly than for a long time. So it's entirely possible that this deadly virus is linked to humans' greed for power or wealth. At the same time, it's entirely possible that there exists a holy God who could use this pandemic to change things for good.